Russell Brand is heaping praise on Fox News, and specifically Tucker Carlson, for being the only ones to criticize big business. Take a look.
Isn't it interesting that Tucker Carlson is the only person that have like Glenn Greenwald on? He's the only person that will attack big business. And lots of you that are like left-leaning or Democrat in your previous biases or just in your persuasion will think that Tucker Carlson maybe is a, what did someone call him once, a human boat shoe? A lot of people don't care for Tucker Carlson. But what interests me is that Fox News used to be a channel that we continually berated and baited when it was like Bill O'Reilly and Sean Hannity and all those guys. We used to torment them about their stance on numerous issues. But nowadays, if you want a channel that's going to criticize big business, big tech, big corporations, mainstream media generally and broadly, peculiarly, you're most likely to find that on Fox News. Why don't we have a leftist mainstream media outlet that would showcase a voice like Jimmy Dore's? Why is that? What has become of the left?
What has become of the left? So there's a lot here, right? Now, for one, he's actually right. We should have a leftist media outlet. You know why we don't have a leftist mainstream media outlet? Because there's no money in it. That's the problem, Russell. That's the big problem. And I agree. Again, if you're pointing, if anybody's pointing at CNN or MSNBC and saying, "Oh, that's the left," no, that's not at all true. Preposterous. Now that unfortunately leads to a problem where Tucker Carlson will lightly tweak big corporations over nonsense issues like being too woke, right? And he gets praise from members of the left. So let's be clear, Tucker Carlson is a fascist. Plain and simple. Now, has Tucker Carlson co-opted certain leftist language against big business? Yes. He's also used that criticism of corporations to promote baseless conspiracies, anti-LGBTQ language, and white nationalism. Notice how Tucker Carlson never really criticizes corporations, big companies, big tech, for not raising wages, having poor working conditions, busting unions, mistreating employees. He never talks about that. Never, ever talks about that. No, what they use is criticism of rainbow capitalism as a proxy to go after social progress. Now, rainbow capitalism is a problem. I will agree with that. Now, by the way, if you're wondering what rainbow capitalism is, it's basically where companies pretend to be champions of progressive causes, like, for example, the LGBTQI plus community, without actually doing anything to support them. Like, for example, advocate for, I don't know, higher wages, making sure that they're protected on the job from discrimination. Or, you know, they also just don't make sure that the workers get a fair wage. And these same companies also donate to anti-gay, anti-trans politicians. And then, of course, there is weaponizing identity to shut down legitimate criticism. I think it's a major problem that happens on the left. Establishment liberals tend to use that a lot to shut down progressive criticisms of politicians who unfortunately choose to serve their donors over actual people, over actual workers. Like, for example, if you were to criticize a politician on the left that happens to be a woman, a Democrat, or a minority, you immediately get dogpiled. How dare you? How dare you criticize a female politician or a woman of color? How dare you? Well, I'm not criticizing her specifically I'm not talking about her race or anything like that. I'm talking about the fact that she's taking giant corporate donations and then doing exactly what the corporations want her to do and not actually serving the people. That's a problem. And so, nonetheless, we have this issue where you're called a sexist for pointing out that politician taking large amounts of corporate money, siding with those corporations, and it is deeply, deeply frustrating. That's why, and I understand this is why people move towards reactionaries like Glenn Greenwald, for example. So that kind of reactionaryism, right, from these people who now go and criticize everything that the Democrats do just to criticize Democrats and don't criticize you know, the right wing. I mean, that's why these people are doing so well now when it comes to online discourse. Now, here's the thing. This is where brand misses the mark. Okay? There is progressive media out there. There's no progressive mainstream media, of course, right? Again, progressives aren't allowed on television. You want to wonder why that is? It's because we don't have any money. We don't have any power. There's no actual leftists in government. There's no actual leftist policies that are being pushed in government. This is all corporate. This is all establishment centrism, radical centrism, if you will, right? There is progressive media, but it unfortunately, it's on the fringes. Now, progressive media actually does call out corporations. They call out mainstream media. They call out big tech. They call out censorship. But progressive media, online independent media, does so without being a pipeline to the far right. And so that's why I see a problem with some leftist or media that claims to be leftist independent media, that they'll ignore these issues of transphobia, or they'll utilize insane conspiracy theories in order to attract that audience. But again, you know why there is no progressives in mainstream media? Because they hate progressives. Because progressives challenge the elite's economic interests. It all comes down to money. It all comes down to money. It all comes down to power. If you have the money, you have the power. Because you can buy members of government in order to push your own agenda, which happens to be the corporate agenda to make more money. You don't see progressives on CNN because CNN is a giant media corporation that will protect itself and their own economic interests. Now, getting back to Tucker Carlson, again, you don't see him actually calling for leftist principles like nationalizing oil, for example, to get oil prices down, or the banks, for example, after the 2008 financial crisis that was caused by the banks. I forget which country. I think it was Iceland or Finland. I think it was Iceland that nationalized their banking sector, and they avoided the worst of the recession. We could put a handle on gas prices if we nationalize our oil, even for a short time. But we refuse to do that. Instead, corporations were allowing them to price gouge us. You know, the Biden administration's plan to help us with gas prices, a gas tax holiday. You know what that is? That's a gimmick. That's what it is. And you know who said that? Barack Obama, calling it a gimmick. It is not going to do anything to help the inflation. In fact, it's actually going to make the road funding, infrastructure funding worse. And it's not going to take away from the profit motives of these large corporations, these oil companies that are ripping us off every single day. So, yeah. But again, you're also not going to see Tucker Carlson talk about how companies took COVID relief money and then use that money not to retain employees, not to pay them during the pandemic. No, they went and bought back their own stocks, which led to higher executive bonuses. They fired people, and then they raised their prices arbitrarily. And we can and we know that's for a fact because right now all these corporations are posting record profits at a time where they say, "Oh no, it's we have to raise our prices because of inflation and supply chain issues." Are there supply chain issues? Yes, there are. But the fact that they can sit there and post record profits shows that they are raising their prices far beyond what they actually needed to compensate for supply chain issues. They are price gouging us, plain and simple. They are stealing from us, is what they're doing, and blaming us for getting a stimulus check. It's BS. But do you ever see Tucker Carlson talk about that? You ever see Tucker Carlson actually holding a corporation accountable for that stuff? No. No. What he's going to do is he's a demagogue. He's going to blame inflation on you getting those checks, on the government, and on immigrants. And he also doesn't call it the fact that the left is not represented on cable news. In fact, he calls MSNBC the far left. That's what he does. So Tucker Carlson shouldn't be praised for a goddamn thing. Goddamn thing. You know, when he had Chris Smalls on, by the way, and I thought Chris Smalls was good for going on to Tucker Carlson and reaching that audience. But what he tried to do when Smalls was on, and Smalls did not fall for the bait, is he tried to get him to attack Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. That was the whole point. You know who's not going to go on Tucker Carlson again? Chris Smalls. Because he's not going to get invited. So now, if you're invited on Tucker Carlson, and he keeps inviting you back, it means that you're doing exactly what Tucker Carlson wants you to do, which is to punch left. So if you're going on Tucker Carlson and you keep getting invited back as a so-called leftist, then you're doing it wrong. The goal to be on Tucker Carlson is to say something that is so objectively true and yet outrageous and damaging to the right wing than to never get invited back. That should be the goal there. That said, I don't know what Russell Brand is doing. I just don't know anymore. But it does suck. Tucker Carlson is not a populist. He's a demagogue. He blames woke culture for pretty much everything. And it doesn't surprise me that Russell Brand can't see through the grift. He's either not a very savvy person, right on some things, but again, very simple, or maybe he sees that on the right, being a faux populist might be pretty good for clicks and views. And if you want to keep building a bigger audience, that's what you do. That's where you go. Very sad to see in either case.